Hi, Dan, Elder Millennial here. Sonic 2 for Game Gear frustrated young Dan to no end. No matter how many times I played this thing, I couldn't get past the boss of the first level. You face it with no rings, and it is super hard. You might play it now and be like, it's super easy, whatever, I can get past it, no problem. Well, I couldn't, and I would lose a bunch of lives, and maybe if I beat it, I would have like one life left to go to the next zone, and then I would die and have to start all over anyways. This game I really didn't like that much growing up, but maybe since I haven't played past the second level, it's actually pretty good. Maybe it's a secret gem and I just don't know about it. Or maybe it's a complete piece of trash and the later levels are even worse than the ones that I played as a kid. There's only one way to find out. Grab 6 AA batteries again, and let's dive into Sonic 2 for the Game Gear. So despite sharing a name and being developed at the same time, Sonic 2 on the Game Gear is completely different from Sonic 2 on the Genesis. Unlike with Sonic 1, there aren't even a handful of levels or enemies that are shared between the games. This also marks the debut of a new developer for the series, Aspect, one that would be developing every other mainline Sonic game for the Game Gear moving forward. Despite the new developer, there is a lot of consistency between this game and the previous one. It's pretty much the last entry before things start getting experimental with the appropriately named Sonic Chaos. Despite Tails prominently featuring on the cover and level art, you're stuck with just Sonic once more. The opening of the game does feature a little story sequence, continuing the tradition of the Game Gear game's odd tendency to feature more story elements than their Genesis brethren, so that's cool, I guess. There's a lot more exploration in this game than Sonic 1, despite there not being a ton to look for. There's no bonus levels, but there are hidden Chaos Emeralds. Levels feature multiple paths to finish, which adds a bit of replay value to the game. Whether or not you want to replay some of these levels, well, that is yet to be seen. Spin Dash, despite making its debut in Sonic 2 for Genesis, is sadly absent. Oddly, there are lots of enemies and barriers that require you to roll into them, so it makes you miss Spin Dash more than you probably need to. So remember when I got frustrated with how hard this game was as a kid? Part of me wondered if it was really that hard or if I was just a kid who was, impatient and wasn't very good at the game. No, this game is really hard, and worse, it's hard in really cheap ways. If you're playing this on actual hardware and not an emulator with a rewind feature, you're going to be replaying sequences over and over and over. There's many times where you're required to make blind jumps without knowing where you're going, and the only way you can, move forward is to just memorize the way. Also, the game will launch you into traps just to be a dick. Worst of all, you get 0 rings in the boss Act 3 levels. If you die while playing the boss, which you will, you'll be sent all the way back to the beginning of Act 3, which, is usually an entire level. And it's really easy to run out of lives, making you start the whole dang game over again. And if it happens to you, you'll probably did what I once did. Just go play something else. So let's talk a little bit about the sprites and art style. The Sonic sprite is looking pretty good here with some improved detail, and the jump ball isn't bad either, just showing a hint of the weird ovalness that's to come. Aspect, for the most part, consistently shows a great eye for level art, and most of the levels here look pretty good, Sky High Zone being my personal favorite. Art is full of saturated colors, which is important on a Game Gear's highly desaturated screen. The Sonic icon in the bottom corner doesn't have a goofy grin anymore, and Sonic will look at you impatiently if you don't move. It's little things like this that make it feel a little bit more like an actual Sonic game rather than some weird kids version of Sonic. So I gave Sonic 1 some props for feeling fast, but I think Sonic 2 may actually perform better and more consistent than Sonic 1. You can still get slowed down from things like falling spikes and bridges, and there's a lot of sprite flicker when things get really busy, but this is probably Aspect's best performing Sonic game. Even the water level doesn't lag out, making it much more playable than Sonic 1. Whether it makes it more fun, well, that's another matter. So now we're going to the levels. So I can't get over this. Why is Tails in all the thumbnails and all the materials for this game prominently feature Tails? He's even on the cartridge twice. Well, when he's supposedly been kidnapped according to the cutscene at the beginning of the game. I have feeling that an earlier version of this game attempted to add in tails, but it was like too much for the Game Gear. There's just too much tails in everything about this game, but you don't actually have tails in anything. Like, it's just the graphics. So I don't know where to mention this, so we're going to talk about it right up front, but it seems like this game was definitely developed with a different sequence of levels in mind. So Green Hill Zone, there's another Green Hill Zone in this, is by far the easiest level, but it happens in the middle of the game. Instead, you play Underground Zone first. And my only guess is that Sega didn't want Sonic 2 to open with the exact same level as Sonic 1, so they just moved the level instead of, you know, just renaming it like they did in Sonic 2 for Genesis. Another thing to note is that the Game Gear Sonic games really don't understand how the spinning sign thing works. So in the Genesis games, when you pass one, you turn it from Eggman to whatever your character is, signaling your conquest of that level. You've blown past Robotnik. But in the Game Gear games, these signs tend to act more as like a random bonus. It feels fundamentally backwards that you'll often run by a sign, and if you don't win a prize, you get a Robotnik, which is what used to signal that you didn't beat the level yet. It's just very confusing, and I'm not sure why they did it this way. Let's get to the levels. So as I mentioned, we start with Underground Zone. This is your usual lava mountain level, and it feels like a later level because this level's really hard for a first zone. You got spikes that you can't always outrun, blind jumps, secret passages, falls to your death in lava, mine carts. Like, this is a crazy intro to a game like this. And then Act 3 arrives. You have no rings, and the game forces you to launch yourself into a pit of lava where Eggman rescues you from death for some reason. And then he puts you next to a crab. Is he trying to like feed his robot crab with you? And this robot crab thing is freaking hard. I can do it with my eyes closed now due to extensive practice, but it was almost impossible for me to beat this as a kid. You're basically just jumping out of the way of, you know, balls that bounce down for some reason. I don't know who is launching these balls, but you can't really attack the boss. You just have to survive long enough for Eggman to launch himself into the boss, killing it for some reason. It's not really clear why any of this happens. It doesn't make any sense. Well, get used to it. This is Sonic 2 for Game Gear. So the next level is Sky High Zone, which, you know, often when you hear someone complain about this game, they're gonna mention Sky High Zone because of the gliders. Those gliders on a lot of promotional artwork, and, you know, a lot of people don't like them because they're kind of hard to control. But honestly, Sky High Zone is the best level of this game, and it's the only one that I would play again for fun. Mostly it's because the zone music is just fantastic. I mean, I hum this song all the time. Just listen to it. It's really good. And people say Game Gear doesn't have any good music. Well, for the most part, they're right. But yeah, every once in a while, you get a good one. I really like how this zone looks, and the stormy weather in the second act is really a fun touch. Like, I like how it changes everything. Now, the boss's level is a robot chicken where you have to, like, kill the chicks and eggs first. It's way easier than the first level's boss, which is another reason why I think this was swapped with Green Hill Zone. But because you don't have any rings and every hit is insta-death, you can still easily bleed away lives here. Next is Aqua Lake Zone. Oh, here we go. Another water level on the Game Gear. Well, at least this time, the game doesn't slow to a crawl while you're trying to make your way through. And there's a pretty easy to use skip across the surface of the water ability that, you know, if you're a ball and you go real fast, you can actually stay out of the water entirely in the first act. The second act, no such luck. This level is brutal with not nearly enough oxygen providing bubbles and some incredibly tight corners you have to navigate fragile bubbles around. This is also maybe the longest level in the entire game, and you're going to want to throw this game through a window in the final bubble sequence as you dodge lobsters and spears, falling all the way back to square one, over and over and over. The boss is a weird seal thing that hurts itself once, then doesn't again. It also balances Sonic like a ball, which is fun, but it took me forever To figure out to beat it, you jump on it as well as inflating a ball, because the first time it taught you that it hurt itself. So once again, this game makes no sense. Next is Green Hill Zone. Wait, what? Green Hills, like Green Hill from Sonic 1? Yeah, it's got an S now, but yeah, it's the same. It's the same level. But in the middle of the game? Why is it here? What is going on? This was obviously originally developed to be the first level of the game, and it is very, very easy. It almost feels like a bonus stage. It's so easy compared to every other level in the game. I mean, the boss is hard, like every boss in this game, but it's not as hard as level 1's actual boss. Next, we have Gimmick Mountain Zone, or Gimmick MT period zone. There's always got to be a factory level in late Sonic, and here we have this oddly named Gimmick Mountain. It's actually an okay level with some good challenges and some odd circle things that take a minute to figure out how to use. I kind of completely forgot about this level due to the insanity that's to come in the next zone, but it's okay. The boss is easy to figure out, but you'll die a ton trying to beat it. If you've somehow made it this far not using an emulator, then my hat is off to you, because the only way I can beat this game is using an emulator with a rewind function. And now we have Scrambled Egg Zone. It's an appropriate name for this level. This zone is not fun. This is by far one of the worst levels in Sonic history. I'd rather play all the water levels in the world before I ever go back to Scrambled Egg Zone. It is a terrible name for a terrible level. Why am I so mad about this level? Because this level is all about punishing you. Both acts are full of pipes that shoot you through with no way knowing where you're going to end up without trial and error. You're just going to get deposited into spikes and get killed because the game just wants to mess with you. Remember, this game is really stingy with lives and continues, and there's no checkpoints, so I'm convinced that this level would be almost impossible outside of an emulator with a rewind function. And I really cannot express enough how much this level is not fun. My pulse is just going up thinking about it. But to cap it all off, after all the frustration, the big boss of the whole game. Oh yeah, we're talking Metal Sonic here. Bet this is going to be so hard after all the incredibly difficult battles we've been through. This must be just the most impossible boss there's ever been. And it's the easiest boss of the whole game. You can bounce off of him when he's in ball, so you're pretty much impervious to any attacks, and when you beat him, he just dies. So I guess there must be another fight with like Eggman or something. This was just like the beginning, and you gotta rescue Tails. Like, I bet there's like a whole thing that comes after this, right? Oh, the credits are rolling, and Sonic is running towards something. I assume Tails, because we saw Tails get kidnapped at the beginning of the game, so he's running, night is falling, and Sonic stops. He looks up into the night sky where he sees the ghost of Tails. Did Eggman kill Tails in this game? The word "end" slams onto the screen. That's right, it's the end. Your best friend, I guess, is dead. And to really stick it to you, you get a game over, and then everything starts over. You get to relive your best friend's apparently fatal kidnapping. Not what I was expecting. I mean, I thought you had to go through deviant art for this kind of thing, but wait a second. Well, apparently there's another zone that I didn't make it to, one that you can only reach after collecting all the Chaos Emeralds. It's Crystal Egg Zone. Helpfully, the game does not explain any of this to you, and I only found this out after researching the game to see if you even had Chaos Emeralds to collect. That shows you how many I found. So for the interest of my sanity, we'll use a cheat code to check it out, and yeah, it's a zone. It's kind of hard to see on a Game Gear screen, and alright, well, Crystal Egg Zone. You get to play more Sonic 2 as your reward for finding all those Chaos Emeralds. Congratulations. And the ending isn't really different. You basically just have Sonic and Tails in the sky, so Sonic dies too, I guess. I don't understand what's going on here. So after all that, should you play Sonic 2 for Game Gear? Well, if you've watched through this whole thing and you still haven't made your decision, I I don't think anything else I'm going to say is going to make it one way. Don't play this game. Don't play Sonic 2. The only reason to play Sonic 2 is for Sky High Zone, which has awesome music, but everything else is just no fun at all. The last levels are super cheap. I wasn't missing anything not being able to play them as a kid, and it's just not a fun game. I would say it's probably the least essential of all Sonic Game Gear games. You can probably play every other one first before you get to this one. Maybe. More about that in a future one. If you do decide to play this game, make sure you play it on an emulator where you can rewind, or else you're going to find yourself very frustrated and you're going to chuck your analog pocket through the window, and that's going to damage both your analog pocket and the game, and analog pockets are hard to find these days, so don't do that. You know what's more fun than playing Sonic 2? Subscribing to this channel. That's more fun. Marginally. I mean, you don't have cheap deaths when you do it. At least I hope not. That would be bad. It would be bad for a lot of reasons.